A couple of summers back, I did some Minneapolis Metro musky fishing with a young guide and bait shop owner named Josh Stevenson. Like me, he fishes for almost anything that swims, but is particularly consumed with muskies.
Nice. Get some muskies. He hook good? Looks like it. No. Get him.
Thank you. Wow.
So my question
You
is,
just nailed him.
whose fish is this?
Oh, that's
Is
good
this
question.
mine or yours?
I'll split it with you.
After a couple of days on the water and getting to know and more importantly trust each other, we became good friends.
Not bad for a city boy, Josh.
I'd finally found a fishing partner who could not only keep up with me, had no trouble getting out of bed at 4 a.m., and above all could keep his mouth shut.
It is a good
The
one.
perfect guy in which to download my database gathered in more than a half a century of fish addiction.
What do you think? What's the conversation about? You think we should go somewhere else? Is that it? You want to go somewhere else?
Josh and I spent the past season together, investigating a number of things involving muskies, one of which was sound. Fish live in an environment that's wired for sound, really not for sight. What's the right sound? I don't know, but I'm hoping I can find out. I had some hypotheses I wanted to test, plus had built a topwater lure specifically to make a sound that my 50 years of musky fishing suggested was a sound they really responded to. But before we get into that, I'd like to share a few minutes of our underwater microphone results gathered from a variety of lures, both topwater and subsurface. This might surprise you.
It's a size 7 Indiana blade on a medium-sized bucktail. The double 10s, Cowgirl.
Here's a single straight shaft number 10. Listen to this safety pin designed with a homemade urethane spinner. Here's just a great big old wiggling minnow bait. What's interesting, here's the bait in the water with no tip in the water. Now I'll put my tip in the water. Somewhat of a difference, huh? Josh tries a 40-year-old Eddie. He's not impressed.
This is kind of boring. This is a boring bait.
Let me just try one.
Why does it flip upside down?
Here's what it should sound like.
This lure is designed to have the back hook, the middle hook rather, click on the spinning back tail. So it's going to go click, 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 click.
Listen to this creeper. I'd bite that one. This is what we call a globe-style lure. With an outboard in the distance. This is a river-to-sea rover, zigzag type bait. And here's a Whopper Plopper. "51 years ago, I caught my very first muskie on a lure like this, a mud puppy. And I'd noticed early on that if this tail were bent just perfectly and it made a hollow popping noise, it caught more fish. Also noticed that when the tail got loose, if I bent it out this way a little bit and re-glued it, making it broader here, that it also made a better popping noise and caught a lot more muskies. But this lure had inherent problems. This is brass, chrome-plated brass, and it's just a screw eye, and I could unscrew it or bend it a little bit, and the bait would fall apart. Many years later, musky fishermen made some improvements where solid shaft, no screws, much tougher bait, increased the size of the tail. But the problem is it's still a metal tail. Too many casts, bumping it into a tree or a rock, or catching a fish, the tail would bend, go out of tune, and you have to start over again. The other problem, of course, is with a metal tail, when a fish bites it, it just might get in the way. I decided I wanted to make a stronger, better, louder lure that amplified the positives and eliminated the shortcomings of my old favorites. I've decided on a simple torpedo-shaped body, but with the connection point just below center line to help force the tail into the water. It's why I chose the one-piece design rather than a hinged one. I made a tail out of Sculpey clay, which I fashioned into the shape I wanted around a pin, which left a hole dead center. I used a tea bottle for a mold box for the body, and a little cup as a mold box for the tail. I made both the molds from something called HS3, which is a high-strength RTV silicone compound. We'll make the tail first. Insert a tube the inside diameter, which is large enough to accommodate the hook hanger shaft. Sometimes I use a solid shaft and put in a tube or rivets later. I'm making the tail from a 2-part flexible rubber compound to which I've swirled a little orange and red dye. After pouring, you'll want to squish and squeeze it, or even make a small vent in the mold at the bottom of the tail to get all the air bubbles out. Make sure the shaft is perfectly centered. I'd suggest at least a couple hours for the rubber to set up, depending on the temperature. I've built a hook hanger of .062 stainless to fit inside the body mold. The inside of the mold has a slit so I can experiment with front hook placement. I've mixed a super tough, fast-setting compound called Alumilite White with a drop of red dye, and I'm pouring a solid head of this urethane plastic. It's tough as nails, and it'll take about 15 minutes for the solid head to set up. The stick passes through the connection eye for proper positioning, plus it holds the hook hanger in place. I'm mixing up some Alumilite White resin, the same stuff as we used for the head. I've drilled a hole dead center in a bottle cap just bigger than my wire to seal the mold and keep the wire dead center. I pulled the wood pin, then rolled the mold to distribute a coating of resin around the surface to make a nice skin. How long you roll depends on how long you waited to pour the resin from the cup to the mold. When you let it rest for a final setting, it's a good idea to leave it hook side down for better stability. In about a half hour, you pop the cap, and drill a couple of holes through the skin in the back of the lure. This is where you'll pour the 610 foam into the lure cavity. 610 is also a 2-part resin you weigh and mix. But this stuff expands 10 to 1, so you only need 1/10 of the space by volume. This is my favorite part.
Just a look, come here. Nice. 24th musky caught on a Whopper Plopper. I don't know how many consecutive days on Whopper Plopper, but it's the 24th muskie of the year. We're only halfway through the season. 24th muskie caught on the same lure. All right. I don't need pancakes in the morning. Muskies, sun hitting the trees, coming right over the trees. 6:30. Whopper Plopper. Look at all the damage. Yet it won't break. Teeth marks, just bends right back into place. Ha.
We're constructing an almost indestructible surface lure I call a Whopper Plopper. We've made 2 molds and cast a urethane head and skin body. Also made a mold for an always stay in tune rubber tail. The next step is to drill holes and foam the body with 610 foam. I love this part. In a few hours we can pop the molds.
Whopper Plopper. Just trying to determine whether I have to bring him in the boat or not to get him off. Just let him swim around. I just hate to just bring them up and quick hurry up and put them in the net when they're green and they get all tangled up. I'm not fighting him to death. He doesn't realize he's in trouble anymore. He just calmed down. Whopper Plopper number 32 or something.
This is a Whopper Plopper. My very first prototype of this goofy thing, which Josh had adopted the moment he laid ears on it, ended up producing over 30 muskies and was still ticking.
All right. Whopper Plopper again.
Oh, yes.
Whopper Plopper. That is my favorite lure of all time. I'm telling you.
Whopper, Plopper. Yep.
30 Muskies, that's number 30.
We're building one from scratch, and it's ready to come out of the molds and be assembled. The final step is removing the body from the stretchy RTV. Even irregular shapes can be extracted without tearing the mold. Cut off the tail excess with a knife and sand the foam down smooth to the urethane skin, which I did not do yet, and then generally trim it. Lastly, we twist the tail out of the mold and trim off the tube with the Dremel. Now all we have to do is put on the tail, add a bead, and then bend a loop with a round nose pliers and twist it shut. We'll be ready to go. So there you've got it, the Whopper Plopper. Its tail is totally flexible and it's never going to break or get out of tune. And hopefully the tune yours plays will be the right one. That was the quick version. If you want to see this in detail, go to makelure.com or huntforbigfish.com website and go to the lure making thing, and we'll show you in exact detail every single step of how to make one of these for yourself. For my friend Josh and I, this was a season of muskies, and we took a few baby steps toward understanding sound.
What do you think, Mog? Back into the pliers. If you were really good, you would like retrieve the pliers. My old dog would have done that. Now to me, this is the ideal release. Josh and I have caught so many muskies on Whopper ploppers. This has got to be close to the 40th. I don't really need any more pictures. I'm going to try to just unhook this rascal right there. Good morning.
You might wonder, have I come to any conclusions after literally putting my own ears underwater into the fish's environment to try and more closely hear what they hear?
How does that work? That is remarkable.
Wow, that was really cool.
After sharing a few of these sounds, I might ask, what do you think? I've tried to provide a few hints like ambient noise has to play some kind of role. That single-bladed inline spinners actually make more noise than double blades of the same size, which, among other observations, suggests at times maybe a whisper is better than a shout, especially on large specimens. That double-bladed topwater baits have a totally different sound than unbalanced ones. Based on observations with other species and balanced versus unbalanced surface lures, I suspect there's some predatory trigger related to a terrestrial creature in the water versus a fish chasing fish sort of sound. I don't have time to explain. I know this for sure. Sound is the long-range sensor in a fish's zone of awareness, and even at shorter distances, it's likely sound is more important than sight. We know small nuances in the visual aspect of a lure can make a big difference. But what about sound? The stimulus both fish and their environments are most wired for.
Sounds like a storm.
I don't know yet, but I do hope I'll find out
Usually
someday.
110 yards away, maybe 120. And I'm sure that microphone is not nearly as sensitive as a fish is.
Especially a big fish, right, Larry?
One that got big. I think in places where there aren't people, a big fish might even be attracted. I've had him hit my propeller on a 20-horse motor. But where there's a lot of fishermen, a survival strategy probably depends upon staying away from it.